Pawn shop. I would imagine one of the positives of it and one of the negatives is working with family.
I used to
And
say
day
this all the
in-
time, like the best part of my business is working with my family, the worst part is working with my family. Every business needs a dictator.
For years, Pawn Stars looked almost impossible to kill. Since its debut in 2009, the History series had transformed a Las Vegas pawn shop into a global television brand, built around the seemingly simple chemistry between Richard, the old man, Harrison, his son, Rick, grandson, Cory, and Austin, Chumlee, Russell. The formula was remarkably durable. An unusual object arrived, someone argued over its value, an expert was summoned, and Rick decided whether the gamble was worth taking. By the time the original run reached its 23rd season, the show had become one of history's signature franchises. Then, almost without warning, new episodes stopped. And now Rick Harrison has finally revealed the real reason why Pawn Stars ended. But to make sense of it all, we need to start from the very beginning. The first cracks in the empire. The transformation began almost immediately after Pawn Stars premiered in July of 2009. What had been a family pawn shop on Las Vegas Boulevard suddenly became a television phenomenon, and the people behind the counter became celebrities. Tourists began lining up outside the gold and silver pawn shop to see the place they had watched on television. But behind that success, something unexpected was happening. The business was no longer simply about buying and selling objects. It was becoming a valuable entertainment property. One of the first people caught in that transformation was Wayne Jeffries, a Las Vegas promoter who had worked with the Harrisons before the cameras arrived. According to Jeffries' 2012 lawsuit, he had been hired in 2007 as a consultant, manager, and advisor to pitch the pawn shop concept to television networks. He claimed he helped secure the development deal that eventually became Pawn Stars, negotiated agreements with the cast, and then found himself pushed out after the show became successful. The lawsuit alleged breach of oral contracts and claimed he had been denied promised fees and shares of merchandising revenue. Then came the strange story of Cajun Pawn Stars. In early 2012, History launched a spin-off set at Silver Dollar Pawn in Alexandria, Louisiana. According to Jeffries' lawsuit, the original Pawn Stars cast had been blindsided by the news that History had commissioned the spin-off, and Jeffries claimed that network executives became unhappy after information about the situation reached the press. He alleged that the network then pressured the original cast to sever its relationship with him. Barely 3 years after Pawn Stars premiered, the family was already navigating a battle over who controlled the television empire growing around them. And the legal trouble didn't stop with the man who claimed he helped create the show. In December of 2012, Venture YAB, a talent agency that said it had represented the Harrisons and Chumlee, filed a lawsuit seeking more than $5 million. Venture alleged that the cast had been steered away from the agency and toward United Talent Agency after Pawn Stars became a major hit, costing Venture millions in commissions. The lawsuit even named History executives, including then-President Nancy Dubuque, alleging that they had interfered with Venture's agreements so that another agent could represent the stars. Then the conflict moved from Hollywood contracts back to the actual pawn shop. In May of 2012, a customer named Daniel Callahan sued Rick and Richard Harrison, alleging that he had been violently removed from the gold and silver pawn shop following an argument over a rifle. Callahan claimed he had been dragged from the store and thrown onto the sidewalk, and sought roughly $20,000 for his alleged injuries. Cory Harrison disputed the account, saying Rick and Richard had not directly confronted Callahan and that getting him out of the store was in their best interests. The show still looked like 4 family members casually buying antiques behind a counter, but underneath that image was a rapidly expanding commercial machine involving managers, talent agencies, networks, spin-offs, and millions of dollars. The family had become valuable precisely because viewers believed they were watching a simple family business. Yet by 2012, that simple business was already generating lawsuits over who had created it, who represented it, who controlled its future, and who was entitled to profit from its success. And that was before the cameras began capturing the cast members' own troubles. It only got worse over time, when the stars became the scandals. At first, Austin Chumlee Russell seemed almost perfectly designed for television. While Rick negotiated, Cory argued, and the old man delivered his blunt verdicts. Chumlee provided the comic relief, the lovable friend whose mistakes became part of the show's charm. Then, on March 9, 2016, that image collided with reality. Las Vegas police arrived at Russell's home while investigating an assault allegation involving another person. What they found had nothing to do with a charge against Russell for assault, but it immediately created a much more serious problem of its own. Inside the house, police reported finding 12 firearms and several kinds of controlled substances. Some of the weapons included handguns, a shotgun, and rifles that police said were not registered. Russell was arrested on substance and weapons charges, but the assault investigation itself did not result in a charge against him. The case could have become a disaster for the franchise. Instead, only weeks later, Russell reached a plea agreement. He pleaded guilty to a felony weapons charge and attempted possession of controlled substances, and the agreement called for 3 years of probation and counseling rather than prison. If he completed probation successfully, the felony would be dismissed, leaving a misdemeanor conviction. At the time, an A&E and history representative also said there had been no change in Russell's status on Pawn Stars. The television machine, remarkably, kept moving, and Chumlee was not the only recognizable face whose private life collided with the image viewers saw every week. Cory "Big Hoss" Harrison had already been arrested in March of 2011 after a confrontation at Murray's Saloon and Eatery in Big Bear Lake, California. According to the San Bernardino County Sheriff's Office, Harrison shoved a security guard and a deputy after an argument at the bar. He was booked on suspicion of battery and resisting arrest, held for several hours to sober up, and then released with a citation. Harrison's lawyer said Cory believed he had done nothing wrong. More than a decade later, Cory had another encounter with police. On September 8, 2023, a Las Vegas officer reportedly saw his Ford F-250 moving between the travel lane and a bicycle lane. The officer described Harrison's eyes as bloodshot and watery and reported an odor of alcohol. Cory disputed the implication that he was intoxicated, saying he had consumed only 1 drink on a flight and attributing his poor performance during field sobriety testing to a leg infection and uneven pavement. Because the breathalyzer was malfunctioning, he agreed to provide a blood sample. He was nevertheless arrested on suspicion of DUI. For viewers, the contrast was striking. On screen, Cory and Chumlee were characters, inside a carefully constructed television world. Away from the cameras, however, both men had dealt with encounters with law enforcement. And then it got worse. The family starts disappearing. By 2018, the Pawn Stars family was already beginning to lose the people who had made its 3-generation image so powerful. Richard, the old man Harrison, had become one of the most recognizable faces on history, but his appearances had diminished as his health deteriorated. When he died in Las Vegas on June 25, 2018, he was 77. Rick later said his father had battled Parkinson's disease for years, and the family had been preparing for his death for roughly 2 years. Richard's death was more than the loss of a popular television personality. The entire premise of Pawn Stars had been built around generations: Richard, his son Rick, and his grandson Cory, with Chumlee orbiting the family business. Richard was the oldest link in that chain and the character who gave the shop its authority. He had run the gold and silver pawn with Rick long before television arrived, and his blunt judgments became part of the show's identity. When he disappeared, the program could continue, but one of its defining ingredients was permanently gone. History could replay old episodes, but it could not replace the man sitting behind the counter. Then, less than 4 years later, another Harrison family battle reached the courts. In February of 2022, Joanne Harrison, Richard's widow and Rick's mother, sued her son over ownership and assets connected to the family businesses. She claimed she had held a 51% interest in the pawn business and alleged that after Richard's death, assets and distributions belonging to her had not been properly accounted for. The dispute involved cash, silver, and other business interests. But Rick denied wrongdoing. He argued publicly that his mother was being influenced by people around her who had their own agendas. For years, millions of viewers had watched the Harrisons argue over antiques, negotiate prices, and joke with one another as though the family business were an unusually successful household operation. Now, the real family business was the subject of a legal fight between a mother and her son. The television version of the Harrisons had always suggested continuity, grandfather to grandson. The lawsuit exposed something much less tidy: questions about ownership, money, and what actually happened to the family's assets after Richard died. And then came another loss. This time, it did not involve television at all. On January 19, 2024, Rick's son, Adam Harrison, died at 39. Adam was Cory's younger brother and Rick's son, but unlike Cory, he was never a regular cast member on Pawn Stars. He had, however, worked at the Gold and Silver Pawn before the television series premiered in 2009. His death was later attributed to an overdose of a controlled substance. Rick publicly mourned his son, writing that Adam would always be in his heart. The timing made the loss particularly significant. Richard had died 6 years earlier. Adam was now gone. And Cory, the grandson who had represented the next generation on television, was already moving toward a different life. Even more strikingly, Adam's death was not incorporated into the upcoming season of Pawn Stars at the time. The family requested privacy while grieving. By this point, the Harrisons were living through something viewers rarely saw behind the cameras. The Pawn Stars brand still projected continuity, but the actual family had endured death, illness, legal conflict, and profound personal loss. And the person who would eventually make the most consequential decision about the show's future was still standing behind the counter: Cory Harrison. Cory walks away, and Rick finally talks. Cory Harrison had been preparing for a life outside Pawn Stars long before viewers realized it. He had grown up at the Gold and Silver Pawn Shop, working there from childhood and eventually becoming the second-generation face of the series. For more than a decade, audiences watched him learn the business from his father, argue with Rick over purchases, and gradually become a successful pawnbroker in his own right. But by 2024, the role that had made him famous was beginning to feel less like a career and more like a costume he had been wearing for too long. That year, Cory moved from Las Vegas to Tulum, Mexico, a dramatic change for someone whose entire public identity had been built around one Nevada pawn shop. His explanation was revealing. Speaking about the show, Cory said, "We're all playing a character on Pawn Stars," and explained that he could not keep portraying himself as a 41-year-old pretending to be 23. Cory was not simply announcing that he wanted to retire from television. He was acknowledging something audiences had suspected for years. The people on Pawn Stars were real, but the version of themselves presented to viewers was also a television performance. Cory's departure therefore struck at the heart of the show's original appeal. The series had always depended on the illusion of watching three generations naturally interact behind a pawn shop counter. But the people had aged, while the television characters seemed frozen in time. Cory had been a child when he began working at the shop, yet television could repeatedly return to the same familiar arguments, jokes, and personalities. His decision to leave suggested that maintaining that formula indefinitely had become increasingly difficult. And importantly, Cory did not publicly identify one scandal or family dispute as the reason he walked away. Then came the moment that appeared to explain what was happening to the franchise itself. In February of 2025, Rick Harrison addressed the future of Pawn Stars and confirmed that the original series was no longer under contract with history. He described the situation as uncertain, with the future of the program still being worked out. Then, he offered a phrase that sounded almost like a warning: "Here's to Pawn Stars 2.0. Interestingly, he did not say Joanne Harrison's lawsuit had caused the series to end. He did not blame Chumlee's 2016 arrest. He did not accuse Cory of destroying the show. He did not announce that history had canceled the program because of one catastrophic ratings collapse. Instead, Rick described a franchise that had reached the end of one phase and was waiting to discover what came next. There was another clue in Rick's comments. He had previously described the insulated world surrounding the Gold and Silver Pawn as a bubble, a self-contained environment that could keep producing familiar television long after the real people inside it had changed. That bubble had protected the formula for years, but Cory's departure demonstrated its weakness. The grandson was gone. The old man was already dead. The real family had changed dramatically. While the television brand was still trying to preserve the image, audiences remembered. So when Rick said, Pawn Stars 2.0, he may not have been teasing a secret scandal at all. He was acknowledging a reality the franchise could no longer avoid. The original family configuration was finished. The question was whether the show could survive without it. And history's next move would finally reveal what Rick meant. Pawn Stars 2.0, the son who didn't come back. In February of 2025, Rick Harrison said the original series was no longer under contract with History, and that the family was waiting to see when filming might resume and what would happen next. His closing phrase was revealing. Here's to Pawn Stars 2.0. And then, new Pawn Stars episodes began airing again in 2026. The official History listings now identify the program as having 24 seasons and hundreds of episodes, while the new episodes continued to feature Rick, Cory, and Chumlee. In other words, Pawn Stars 2.0 did not mean the immediate disappearance of Cory. It meant the franchise had entered a new phase after its contract hiatus, while the familiar cast was still capable of returning. Then, in January of 2026, Cory Harrison's life took another violent turn. While in Tulum, Mexico, he was involved in a serious motorcycle accident that left him with 11 fractured ribs, a punctured lung, a concussion, and internal bleeding. Cory initially posted about the crash on January 26, joking that he was pretty messed up, but was grateful for his motorcycle's crash bars. What followed was far more serious than that first message suggested. He spent 14 days in a hospital in Playa del Carmen, but according to his friend Aaron Chambers, the mounting cost of treatment eventually became so overwhelming that Cory left the hospital against medical advice. Back at his home in Tulum, Cory's condition deteriorated. He developed excruciating pain and dangerously low oxygen levels after leaving the hospital. A doctor was called to the house, and Cory eventually required pain medication despite being reluctant to take strong medications because his brother Adam had died from a fentanyl overdose in 2024. According to Chambers' account, Cory then told those around him that he thought he might die because he could no longer afford treatment. His friends ultimately arranged for him to be transported roughly 4.5 hours to a hospital in Merida, where doctors performed 3 additional life-saving surgeries. He spent another 18 days hospitalized. By the time Cory was discharged, his medical expenses had climbed beyond $100,000. Chambers said Cory had emptied his savings and was struggling with other expenses while still recovering and unable to work normally. His friend subsequently created a GoFundMe campaign with Cory's knowledge and blessing, seeking financial assistance for medical bills, follow-up treatment, medication, rent, and eventual travel back to the United States. The campaign initially carried a much larger target before being reduced to $18,000. Rick Harrison disputed the impression that Cory's hospital bills were still outstanding. Through a representative, Rick said, "As far as I know, I paid all of Cory's medical bills long before he put the GoFundMe out." He added that Cory was a grown man in his 40s and responsible for managing his own finances. Cory's side was different. The fundraising campaign maintained that he had faced more than $100,000 in medical expenses and serious financial strain, while Rick said he had already covered the medical bills. And that brings us back to the real mystery. Pawn Stars did not simply end. Its original contract expired. The show entered a period of uncertainty. Cory announced that he was ready for something different, and Rick publicly acknowledged that the franchise needed a new chapter. Yet history eventually brought the program back, with Cory still appearing. Richard was gone, Adam was gone, the family had endured legal battles and personal tragedies. Cory wanted out of the television persona, and yet the machine kept running. That is perhaps the most revealing ending of all. Pawn Stars survived because it was no longer dependent on exactly the family configuration that made it famous. The old man could disappear. The family could fight. Cory could talk about leaving. Contracts could expire. And still, when the cameras came back on, Rick, Cory, and Chumlee were standing behind that counter again. The real question is no longer, why did Pawn Stars end? It is whether the show that returned is still the same Pawn Stars. Well, That's it for now. Thanks for watching. Did you like this video? If you did, please consider liking, dropping a comment, and hitting the subscribe button so that you don't miss out on our new uploads. Also, don't miss this video you see on your screen right now. It's truly unbelievable.